This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, everyone. Myself, Saili Gupte from Mangrove Foundation. I will be your host for today's session. At the beginning, I request all the participants to please switch off their camera and microphone. Now, I welcome you all to this webinar on cities, urbanization, and environmental challenges on the occasion of World Environment Day on behalf of Maharashtra Mangrove Foundation and United Way Mumbai. The Mangrove Cell, Government of Maharashtra and Maharashtra Mangrove Foundation works towards the protection and conservation of mangroves and marine ecosystem of Maharashtra. Our aim is to promote sustainable livelihood opportunities, cultural heritage, and community resilience of local communities, particularly fisher flocks in coastal areas of Maharashtra, through awareness generation and capacity building programs. United Way Mumbai is a part of 130-year-old United Way movement engaged in nearly 1,800 communities spanning 41 countries across the world. Their mission is to improve lives by mobilizing the caring power of communities to advance the common good. United Way Mumbai envisions a nation where all individuals and families achieve their human potential through education, financial stability, and healthy lives. Coming back to our session, I would like to introduce our today's speaker, Mr. N Vasudevan, a man who has many feathers on his cap. Mr. Vasudevan is an Indian forest officer and currently working as additional principal chief conservator of forest for research, education, and training at Pune. He has a master degree in marine biology from Cochin University of Science and Technology, as well as a degree of public policy and management from IIM Bangalore. He is a former APCCF of Mangrove Cell, heading the department since 2012, and the man behind the inception of Mangrove Foundation. Beside holding several key positions in Maharashtra Forest Department, Mr. Vasudevan had served as managing director of Kerala State Corporation Federation for Fisheries Development, managing director of Kerala State Film Development Corporation, and as registrar of Indian Institute of Science and Technology, Department of Space, Government of Maharashtra. He has also served as the project director or nodal officer for 3 externally aided projects funded respectively by GICA from 1999 to 2001, UNDP from 2012 to 2017, and GIZ from 2013 to 2016. Mr. Vasudevan is a recipient of several awards, which includes the Arun Bongiwar Public Service Excellence Award in 2019, Maharashtra Civil Service Day Honor 2017, Mangrove Society of Indian Fellowship in 2016, Sanctuary Asia Wildlife Service Award in 2015, and M.S. Swaminathan Foundation Special Award in 1992. Now, I would like to request Vasudevan sir to take over the session.
Thank you, Saili. Thank you, Mangrove Foundation. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, United Way. And good afternoon to all of you. It's a great pleasure to be with you on the occasion of the World Environment Day. And my greetings to all of you on this very important occasion. One would have loved to plant some trees and speak probably in the field to our colleagues, but this is what COVID has ordained this year. So let us be happy with our digital platform and share our thoughts. Talking about the UN World Environment Day, the UN theme this year was biodiversity. And the Ministry of Environment and Forest Climate Change had chosen urban forests as the sub-theme of it. And this is also happening, just a couple of days after Mumbai was threatened with a huge cyclone, severe cyclone, which of course did not cause any damage, thankfully. But look at it, the Mumbai coast is not known for frequent cyclones. The last one we had was in about 129 years back. Of course, there was one in 1948, which is not so major. But scientists say that the incidence of cyclones in the Arabian Sea is going to increase by 46% by the end of the century. And Bay of Bengal, where all the cyclones used to be earlier, will get a drastic reduction of about 31% in the cyclonic incidents. So such incidents are going to be more, and of course they are natural phenomena, but they are exacerbated by climate change. For example, the intensity, the magnitude of cyclones will increase. And also they are intensified by the presence of suspended particulate matter in the continent. So there are every reasons to believe that there will be more cyclones in our western coast. God forbid such a thing does not happen in the near future forever in India. But that also brings us to the importance of mangroves in Mumbai. We have about, if you consider Mumbai and its suburban areas and the greater Mumbai region, the metropolitan region, then you have about 10,000 hectares of mangroves, or maybe more. And fortunately, the density of mangroves, the mangrove cover of Mumbai has been steadily increasing ever since Mangrove Cell was formed in 2012. This is as per the Forest Survey of India records. So we have, a few, blessings. Mumbai has got the Sanjay Gandhi National Park also, which is about 14,000 hectares. So we have our natural defenses. We have a lot of wetlands. We have to be careful about preserving them. So this city being the place where I speak, some of them references maybe directly to Mumbai, but generally I will speak about the environmental challenges in our cities and suggest some possible solutions for future with the limited knowledge that I have. Because I'm not an urban planner. I'm just a person who has worked in conserving the natural heritage of Mumbai in the last 7-8 years. So with that experience, I will talk a little bit about the environmental challenges in the city. Okay. I'm not able to move my slide. Okay, so this is my topic, cities, urbanization and environmental challenges. I hope you can see that.
Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah, okay. So why do cities exist? That is the first question. Of course, the answers are very obvious. Cities give better productivity because people are in a closer assemblage, and any production, whether it is of industrial nature or service, city gives the proper environment for that. And if you have people living far off, then you have a problem in bringing them together. So you save on commutation if you are in the city. So efficiency is a natural byproduct of city. And then there is effective use of space. If you take unit area and take the number of people living there, with obvious comparison with rural area, you will find that cities are far more effective in the use of space. And they also share the resources well, and there is increased productivity due to externalities and economies of scale. And at a personal level, people migrate to cities or people prefer to live in cities because there are better employment opportunities. They get better income and a better life. And of course, they can nourish better aspirations. So if you look at the history of urbanization, it's a very recent phenomenon. In 1800, there was only 2% of the world population which were living in cities. Now more than 50% of the world population live in cities. All this has happened in the last 200 years or so. And in the next 30 years, it is said that 70% of the people are going to live in cities. That means now every year, about 70 million people, 7 crore people will move to cities and start living there. So cities are going to be the main habitat for human beings in future. That is why from an environmental angle, it is important to discuss the fate of cities and how cities are going to impact the environment in the future, and is there anything that we can do to ameliorate the situation, to make cities more sustainable and livable. So if you take India in 1900, there was only a single city with more than a million population. That was Calcutta. And then by 1911, Mumbai joined that. And from 1911 to 1941, there was no change. There are only 2 cities with more than a million population. But today, according to the 2011 census, we have 53 cities above 1 million population. The pressure that it exerts on the infrastructure is unimaginably high. And the reason for urbanization, and I've talked about that. Now, what is urbanization? It is basically a shift from predominantly rural to predominantly urban settings. Of course, now in many places the boundaries are getting blurred. For example, Kerala, from where I come, it's very difficult to distinguish the boundaries between an urban area and a rural area. So that is happening to many cities. Boundaries are getting blurred, cities are expanding. So the urbanization is a continuous process. It encompasses many things, even the migration of people from rural area to urban areas, expansion of the cities, building of infrastructure, more and more, destruction of the natural resources. They're all part of the urbanization phenomenon. It is also one of the most irreversible impacts on the biosphere. So once you have a city in place, I don't think it is going back to a rural area at any point of time. So it's also the most important and complex socio-economic phenomenon of not only this century, but also the previous century. It has resulted in the loss of highly productive farmland forever. And it has, of course, increased the demand for energy, fossil fuel, food, etc. It has altered the climate. It has modified the hydrological and biogeochemical cycles. And it has fragmented habitats and reduced the biodiversity. But we talk about all the ills that cities bring, the environmental consequences of urban living. But there are also a few good things. I talked about high productivity. The high productivity also means less use of the resources and less ecological footprint. It's a very interesting observation made by a few scientists. And the high density also can make public transport more viable. You can't have public transport to all sorts of places. You can have public transport to a limited area. So if you have a city boundary, and within that boundary, you can operate public transport. Also, you can have areas where people can walk, do cycling, and that sort of things. We have not really built into our Indian city concepts. But then many European cities are moving towards people going to office by walking or through cycling. So there are exclusive areas which are reserved for cyclists and nobody else can go there. And there are, of course, environment-friendly infrastructure and public services. There are pipelines, sanitation, waste management, which are much easier and more economical to maintain, construct, and operate in an urban setting. And the most important thing about urbanization is that people in this pressure cooker environment, they are driven by their innovative skills, and they can also invent green technologies in the future. If there are problems created by technologies, there can be solutions which can be found by technologies. So in the environmentally friendly, they can find environmentally friendly equipments, machines, and they can find vehicles, utilities, etc. Finally, the higher standard of living associated with urbanization can provide people with better food, education, housing, and healthcare. These are also important, and also from the point of view of environment, these are also very important factors to be considered. But then now let's talk more about the problems of urban living. And the problems arise mainly because of the unsustainable consumption patterns. That's one major problem, because now people coming to cities, their consumption patterns change. Earlier in the rural areas, people would depend more on what is available in the immediate vicinity. Whereas in the cities now, people even consume food which is brought from 1,000 kilometers or 1,500 kilometers away. So the cities today are not really looking at the hinterlands for their the supply of food materials. And of course, there are other related things like high demand for energy, fossil fuel, food, etc. And I talked about the carbon footprint of food transport. There was a study in USA where in the western part of USA, in one of the cities, they studied that on an average, the food materials that is consumed by the urban population there is transported at least 1,500 kilometers away. So that is the huge ecological footprint that this food transportation is causing. And then waste production, we are all familiar with it. We are masters of it. We waste a lot of food and it is thrown into the environment. It degenerates along with all the packaging material and containers and plastic that it leaves behind. And we have also, as city dwellers, generally developed a disregard for nature's stock upside. I'm talking about wetlands, mangroves, general tree lands. And we feel that they are all the ornamental things, which are good to look at, but otherwise they don't have any material value. Of course, this thinking is changing, but because we are all busy with our lives in the cities, and we are busy getting into our suburban trains or getting home early, and setting it out in the busy streets. So we have a tendency to disregard the nature's natural heritages. Like, people look at mangroves in Mumbai as wastelands or land which breed mosquitoes and are of practically no use to the urban population. And another problem of urban living is the higher aspiration. Anyone who comes to a city, the aspiration level immediately goes. And with the aspiration level, that is, we cannot blame people for that. People have to be, aiming for higher things in life. But they also, these aspirations also sometimes lead to greed and more than what we want. We desire things which are really not our essential necessities, but much more than that. And that puts pressure on the city's resources, and the city will have to provide for that. And that way, there is an environmental footprint of our aspirations also, which are visible in many cities. And another major problem that you see in the cities is the presence of heat islands, which are very common because you have increased consumption of energy and you have concrete everywhere, buildings everywhere. And these buildings don't radiate energy like the rural areas. They don't reflect or radiate back energy, but the radiation is 30% less than in rural areas. That is, albedo is high, which means now they are also big traps for atmospheric pollutants. So they trap this heat, they trap pollutants, and they increase the cloudiness and fog. And for all this, because of all this, there is higher precipitation also compared to the immediate rural areas. 5 to 10% increase in precipitation in the city areas. And we have a tendency to do pavement everywhere. There are roads everywhere. If there are no roads, we put all these impervious tiles everywhere. So water will not penetrate into the surface. So any rainfall that we get, we are not allowing it to seep into the soil. And thereby the water tables get reduced. So all these problems are there. This is a map which shows, by the National Geographic, how cities will change by 2070, which area will become more warm and hot and dry, and where precipitation is going to be higher. And in India, you can see all that brown spots, which means there's going to be a lot of hot and dry places in India. And most of it will be covering many of our important cities. And water stress, as I said, you have water-related challenges in city. There is the issue of access to clean drinking water. In many places, we have lots of slums here, and there is a problem of not only access but sanitation issues and depletion of the water resources. The groundwater is overexploited in many parts, especially in the smaller towns. Whereas in the larger cities, you have a well laid out water supply system. And groundwater, because of its the multiple pollutants that we throw into the system, gets contaminated also. These problems are compounded by outdated water supply system in many cities. And many of these cities get good rainfall, especially in the cities in the coastal areas. They get very good rainfall. But we have not really developed the infrastructure to harvest and store rainwater. And that would have been a huge boon for all these cities, because with this rainwater, you can do a lot of things. If not actually use them for drinking, so many other uses for this water, which we allow to simply drain away and cause flood. So another interesting thing is that much of the wastewater throughout the world, it goes untreated. And this is true of many Indian cities, where sewage water, up to 70% of the sewage water in Indian cities go untreated. And because of this, and because of our inability to deal with human waste, there is this contamination of the water sources and prevalence of waterborne pathogens. And you also see a lot of habitat degradation by creating cities or allowing cities to expand. We inadvertently or deliberately cause many threats to environment, including deforestation. So if you have a building coming up in a mangrove area or on a wetland, mangroves, of course, because of the strict implementation of laws in the last few years, in places like Mumbai, there has been a lot of control on diversion of mangrove for non-forestry purposes. But in the case of wetlands, they continue to be, at the receiving end of our urban expansion trends. And you will see that the biodiversity in most of the cities are shrinking drastically. And we find greenery limited to parks. This is an anomaly because if you have, like in Mumbai, we have the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, which is wilderness, which is not a park. So wild animals can live there. But many cities cannot have that luxury or do not have that luxury. So while urban planning, we make allowances for parks, for wilderness, even for upcoming cities, we are not really making that allowance. So where will all the urban biodiversity go? So in urban planning, an integral part has to be the allowance for biodiversity. Because in Mumbai, we have Sanjay Gandhi National Park, the vast extent of mangroves. We also created the Thane Creek Flamingo Sanctuary, which harbors a huge amount of avifauna. And a very characteristic feature of many cities is the accumulation of solid waste. This is the result of our hugely wasteful take, make, dispose type of industrial model. And majority of our towns and cities do use open dump sites. And many of them are not properly engineered or managed landfill sites. According to one estimate, only 10% of the solid waste in the Asia-Pacific region goes to properly engineered and managed landfill sites. It's a pity. And there is now the addition of hazardous waste, which is generated by cities, which is causing a huge health hazard. And then there is the modern trend of generating e-waste. China, for example, is the leader in generating e-waste, and no prize for testing that. These are all new trends, and these are all huge drains on municipal budget. Because in many countries, up to 50% of the budget goes for solid waste management. Of the billions of tons of solid waste generated every year, only a small percentage is recycled. And 95% of the plastic that reaches the world, which is estimated, is transferred transported by 10 rivers, out of which 8 are in Asia. So plastic is the most common type of marine litter. 80% of it comes from the land-based source. And this plastic then gets into ocean, and through the currents and the chemical action in the ocean, they become microplastics, and they are everywhere in the sea. They're floating around like plankton. They are ingested by fish, seabirds, marine mammals. Through fish, they enter the human diet, and they pose a rather unexplored health hazard. And now with the COVID attack, we have a new problem, which is the problem of masks, PPE kits, and sanitizer bottles, which we have started using in large numbers, and their use is going to increase also in the future, at least in the near future, till vaccines are found. And we have to find ways of disposing of them. They are also health hazard because they may have the virus still clinging onto them. So these are major issues for cities. But I think if you consider all forms of pollution that affect cities, I think the most lethal is the air pollution. And it kills so many people. For example, in China, it is estimated that the air pollution contributes to 1.2 million to 2 million deaths per annum, which is, of course, far, far more than what COVID could do. So these are, air pollution has been increasing. The other day I was watching the Crown series where they showed the air pollution increasing to dangerous levels in London in 1952. And that almost cost Churchill his prime ministership. So these are, issues which we have not been able to really tackle. We know the examples of Delhi, where the fire that originated in all the fields that surround Delhi, sugarcane fields, or the fields after the stubble burning, how that created such an impact in Delhi. And the bushfire that happened in Australia, I happened to be there in Canberra at that time, and the amount of smoke that it generated. So these are problems which we are really struggling with all the time. And with our continuous use of fossil fuels, for example, we still have fossil fuel coal-fired power stations. 50% of them are in China, and we also produce a lot of electricity through coal-fired power generators. The concentrations of particulate matter in the air goes up, and all the associated problems come up. Of course, climate change is universal, but cities have a very important role to play, because cities contribute significantly to the greenhouse gas emissions. As such, cities occupy only 3% of the Earth's surface, but they contribute to 72% of the greenhouse gas emissions, which is very strange. And energy sector, as I said, is the biggest emitter in Asia. There is highest social cost of global warming, which is paid by the cities in comparison to the rural areas. But the main problem is, we have still inadequate share of renewables in the energy mix. So we have to increase more of solar energy, solar power reactors, and solar wind power, ocean thermal power, whatever renewables that we can use in the near future. Even the use of a non-renewable like natural gas will be a good substitute, a more healthy substitute in many cities. So the impact of climate change in cities can be in the form of alterations to the hydrological system, or it can be because of lower crop yields, because nobody grows crops in the cities, but the crops come from the hinterlands or in the rural areas, which are threatened. The rainfall patterns are changing. So indirectly, that also threatens the food security of the cities. And natural disasters, as I discussed at the beginning, they are also a threat to human life and built infrastructure of the cities. There are public health crises which are increasing. Apart from the contamination and pollution issues, there is the vector-borne diseases, like increased incidence of mosquito-borne diseases. And then there is the increased conflict. Conflict can rise due to unemployment. We saw the issue of migrant labor and their poverty, inequality in the city, and the way they are suffering. The people who are in the margins of the society, the outliers of the society, how they are suffering. So these issues are really matters of concern. If somebody thinks that it is going to be a problem for the coastal area, sea level rise, and the cities in the coastal area may get drowned, but then where will people go? So they will migrate to non-coastal cities. So non-coastal cities are also at risk from huge migration and conflict, human migration and conflict. And we saw the economic productivity going down even in the COVID crisis because people could not go out and people could not work, and there was a large-scale migration of reverse migration from urban to rural areas. And this is also going to be a huge drain on that sector, the climate change, because South Asia alone needs to spend $40 billion a year by 2050 on adaptation measures. So here are the top 20 cities which are going to be threatened by climate changes. And two of them are, the top two are from India. And it is in terms of population. In 2070, the expected population in Calcutta and Mumbai are going to be the highest. And it is feared that 40% of Greater Mumbai, that is about 190 square kilometers, could be underwater within a century. And you have other major cities like Dhaka, Guangzhou, Ho Chi Minh City, Shanghai, Bangkok, Rangoon, Miami, and cities like Alexandria, Tianjin, a lot of cities like in New Orleans in USA. So this is a picture of how the climate change is going to affect the major cities which are going to be affected by climate change. In terms of the assets exposed to coastal floods, I think the order is slightly different. Because Miami leads in the amount of assets that they have created and that is likely to be underwater. Interestingly, people are still buying real estate in Miami, thinking that some technological solutions will come where they can still have buildings even with rising sea levels. Let's hope that materializes. So by 2050, it is estimated that over 570 low-lying coastal cities will face sea level rise. And this means that more than 800 million people will be at risk. This is really huge. I'm showing some of the pictures that I got from internet about how the cities will be impacted by temperature increase, predicted temperature increase by the end of the century. Shanghai, for example, will look like this with a 2-degree increase. 1 degree is already, this is above the pre-industrial level, so 1 degree is already on. So another degree and Shanghai will be like this. And this is a comparison of the same place in the Rio de Janeiro, where now the city is flooded after a slight increase in temperature. And this is Miami, the beautiful beach, all going to be underwater. So with all this, the United Nations has declared the Sustainable Development Goals. And the Sustainable Development Goal 11, it talks about sustainable cities and communities. So it's a very important agenda in the global debate on environmental challenges and the future impact of climate changes. Absolutely. And you have all these sub-components like safe and affordable housing, urbanization, and reducing the adverse effects of natural disasters, etc., etc. These are the sub-themes identified by the UN Sustainable Development Goals within that major target 11 of sustainable cities. But there are several barriers to action. If you want to act, there are several barriers to really taking our cities to the level of sustainable cities, or in other words, making cities climate proof. These barriers are, of course, budgetary capacity for many cities. This is a huge. This change to sustainable city means huge investment in infrastructure, and already developed cities will have a huge problem altering the infrastructure. And then there is a major problem of poverty, which is an appendage of many cities, because people live in sheer poverty, and you can't make much changes when your priority is poverty alleviation. And infrastructure condition, the present condition of the infrastructure also cause huge challenges. And housing in many cities is a major problem. Even when there are no slums, we have the problem of lower income and middle income people finding the housing extremely prohibitively costly. And then where there are slums, like you have in Mumbai in large measure, you have all the issues of the degradation of natural environment, people living in very, very pathetic conditions, and also providing urban amenities, the challenge of providing urban amenities to them. So inequality is everywhere. In every city you can find inequality. Maybe to a lesser degree in cities in Europe, but in all other places you will see a lot of inequality. And cities are also characterized by low resilience to change, low resilience and low capability to react or adapt to sudden change. If you take the flood preparedness, if you take Orissa, for example, with their experience with cyclones, they are very amenable to moving to cyclone shelters when there is a cyclone warning. But think about the people of Mumbai; we are not used to it. And even if there is a very strong warning of a very severe storm, it's very difficult to ask people, and not only in Mumbai but also in the coastal areas of Maharashtra, to move away from their cities and take shelter, cyclone shelters. So I will now talk about a few future green innovations which we can think of, technologies. For example, hello, is there a problem? Can I continue?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You continue.
Yeah. So there are.
Yes, sir.
I said earlier that there are problems created by technology, but these problems can be probably addressed to a great extent by technology itself that you cannot imagine today, but tomorrow such technologies may be commonplace. So let's hope that some of these technologies will come in and change the way we look at environment. Because now the COVID has proved that even if you have all these shutdowns, people not traveling to office, people offices not opening, commutation practically nil, no flying. But even with all that, of course the carbon emissions have come down. But we still have 90% of the emissions that that are there. So it is only a psychological barrier that we have gone back to the emission levels of 2010 or even earlier. But then that is not really going to take us to the Paris Agreement targets, because now it's clear that this kind of shutdown cannot continue forever. So no city can afford to do that. But even if you do that, we are not really going to cut emissions to that large degrees. So we have to think of adaptations, also solutions to technological solutions, which will probably draw more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, nature-based solutions, and architectural solutions, buildings that can act as carbon sinks, and of course the electric-powered vehicles are going to come in a big way. And the technology is already improving for solar-based power plants to be cheaper than the coal-based power plants. So a lot of things are changing, and tomorrow we may be able to travel in driverless electric-powered vehicles within the city. And because they are programmed, we can anticipate that there will be no traffic lights, no traffic jams, and you will reach your designated point at the appointed time. If you say 10 minutes, you will reach there in 10 minutes. So it is going to be a huge saving on fossil fuel and all kinds of energy requirements. So I just give you some flavor give you a flavor of what thinking is going on in some of these companies. Adidas, I talked about using waste as a resource. And Adidas is now making shoes. They are talking about making 1 million shoes in the very short term from marine litter, all the nylon and plastic and the nets that we abandon in the sea. That if you collect, it's a good thing that some of the interested NGOs have started collecting using the divers, the litter from the marine environment, and that will be a great asset for them in the future because companies like Adidas are going to come and buy. They'll make not only shoes but T-shirts and all sorts of sportswear and sports gadgets from this. So this is one good ray of hope. And then people are talking about architectural solutions to sea level rise. So if you have sea level rise coming up as a major issue, they say major part of Mumbai is almost 6 meter, just 6 meter above sea level. So any small rise can really create havoc. And this is the case with many European cities like Netherlands. So these cities are now talking about buildings which will like a boat. As the water rises, the buildings will also rise, and as the water recedes, buildings will also come down and settle. So these kind of buildings, if you can build, then sea level is not going to be so much of a change, at least in the short run. So of course, when the buildings start sinking altogether, then we have to find more robust technological solutions. And all our cities are built with concrete, very obvious fact. But do you know that there is 40,000 kilograms of concrete for each living person alive? This is an estimate made by some of the scientists. And every year, we are adding another 500 kilograms of concrete to this world. And in 2011 to 13, there's a study that China alone poured more concrete than US did in the entire 20th century. So that is a kind of expansion and building activity that is going on. And cement industry is responsible for 4% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And this is more than double the greenhouse gas emissions caused by aviation. So we should look at concrete as a probable solution. Today is the problem, tomorrow it can be a solution. And concrete could be a remarkably efficient carbon sponge. For that, you have to understand this, the simple process of making cement. So if you remember your chemistry lectures in school days, then you know that cement is made from limestone, or it can be sources like shells, seashells, and this limestone is mixed with is heated to 1400 degrees when it splits into calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. So effectively, carbon dioxide is released. Okay, so that is contributing to the carbon footprint of cement making. And once this calcium oxide reacts with clay, that is silicon dioxide, you have calcium silicate, which is basically the cement. So in the process of manufacturing cement, you are actually adding releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But look at what happens when cement is used in making concrete. When cement is cured, when this calcium silicate is mixed with water, then it dissolves into calcium hydroxide, and it actually reacts with carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and again forms calcium carbonate. So in this process, if cement manufacturing is creating a greater carbon footprint by releasing more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the curing of cement or the formation of concrete is actually absorbing carbon dioxide. The problem is the desired level at which we want the strength of concrete, we are not really allowing this process to be completed. So now people talk about using materials like wollastonite, which is actually calcium silicate itself. So you don't have to heat it in the first place, which means that you are saving a lot of coal in heating it to 1400 degrees. And also there is no need for adding carbon dioxide to calcium oxide, so that you make, and sorry, there is no release of carbon dioxide in the process. And if you allow concrete to absorb as much carbon dioxide as possible by special methods of making concrete more absorbent in terms of carbon dioxide, then you will have, every time you make a building, you are actually absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it in your buildings, which may last for hundreds and maybe thousands of years. The Pantheon of Greece, is lasting even today. It is 2,000 years old and is made in concrete, because the composition may have been different at that time. So you are actually, talking about cities which become carbon sinks by the very process of expansion. And then there is the energy positive buildings which create more energy than they actually consume during their entire life cycle. Entire life cycle means the process of constructing, bringing raw materials from far off places, constructing the building, and then maintenance. And finally, even if you demolish that building in future, even when you demolish that building in the future, the carbon footprint of that, all combined, these buildings will generate more energy during their lifetime than what they actually consume. So such buildings are already a reality. They have tried it in Norway, where you have challenges like 6 months of absence of sunlight. And if you can do it in Norway, you can do it elsewhere, because in the tropical region you have plenty of sunlight. So you can have buildings which actually are energy positive. And then, of course, we cannot ignore the nature-based solutions. We will talk about more and more farming that makes soil rich in carbon. And also, if you can actually utilize the space in the cities, as I said, you don't have to bring vegetables and fruit from far off places. Probably every roof, every backyard, if there is a backyard, can be used for making vegetables. So if that becomes a movement, the movement of a campaign, I would say, the movement of food materials into the city can be actually reduced, and thereby reducing our carbon footprint. Of course, we have to talk about restoring degraded forests and planting new ones, which is a given thing. But then we are also talking about harnessing photosynthesis to industry by growing plantations and using them to generate electricity. And while generating electricity, the carbon dioxide that they generate is actually sequestered underground. So this is called the BCCS, which is bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, which is a new terminology that is coming up. And then people talk about technologies which will directly capture air from the directly capture carbon dioxide from the air and store it in sinks. So if you have such technologies, things are going to be really different. And the talking about solutions, apart from all the fancy solutions that we talked about, we must be thinking about a serious change in our architecture, the way the buildings are built and the way they are planned, and the way the overall urban planning and the policies that we follow, that must undergo a deep transformation. And now that we are hoping that the COVID curve would be flattened very soon, we have to now worry about the other curve, that is the prevailing curve of climate change. So we have to conserve our natural resources like the mangroves, the tree lands. I said tree lands because they are not necessarily forests. They may be there in the parks, and there are wetlands. And wetlands, in most of the cities, they are severely threatened. Maybe I would say even more threatened than mangroves. And as an ecosystem, they have many ecosystem functions to perform. So we have to really seriously worry about these natural resources, and we have to pursue policies to increase shares of renewables in our overall energy mix. And as I said, we must have technologies, better technologies for waste treatment, and more scientific way of managing our waste. Of course, this will require massive attitudinal change, because every household has to start segregating their waste into degradable and non-degradable, and as many categories as possible, so that recycling, the other uses of this waste, or disposal of waste is far more easier and puts less pressure on the urban municipalities and urban planners. So I talked about the nature-based solutions, and now people are talking about introducing the payment for ecosystem services and carbon pricing, so that we start disincentivizing unsustainable practices. And this will also find resources for environmental conservation. So we also must have policies that incentivize green solutions, and then businesses. Businesses will play a very important role, because they have to look at the sustainability angle, and they have to streamline their production and consumption processes to be more sustainable, and they have to make more sustainable solutions. And such businesses which make a drastic, visible shift towards green solutions should be incentivized through our policies. But one thing I have observed is, after all, the urban planning today, as I have observed, and many of us will agree, does not really mainstream the environmental aspects of it. I have, my own personal observation is that the natural resources within a city, or environmental issues that we always talk about, are sometimes considered as necessary evils to be addressed. They are not necessarily mainstreamed into the urban planning. So that is the case with most of the cities. We fear that if you factor in too much of environmental factor consideration, then the development may take a backseat. My worry is that in the post-COVID world, environment is in many cities, or many countries, it is going to take a backseat, because our priority is going to put the economy back on track, and that is a major cause of worry. So we must not forget that climate change, unlike COVID, which came in a flash and destroyed so many things, climate change is it sets slowly, but it is definite, and it is going to have much greater and much more lasting impacts in future. So we have to plan our cities better. We have to look at technologies which will give us better solutions, and we have to, above all, use nature-based technologies to stay, on top of climate change and make our cities more sustainable. So thank you for this opportunity. It was a pleasure talking to all of you. If there are any questions, I will address. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mangrove Foundation and United Way.
I request all the participants to post their question in chat box. Vasudevan sir will answer some of them owing to the time limitation. Others will be answered through email.
I'm not sure I can see the questions, but if you can, somebody can read out.
Yes, sir. Yes, I'll do.
Yeah.
So we have received one question. That person is asking: is it too late to act on climate change, or we still have time to overcome the upcoming adverse effects?
Yeah, it's not too late. Probably it is never too late, because we have to survive. Even the IPCC says that if the temperature goes beyond 2 degrees, many of the things will become irreversible. So far, it has not reached that stage, and this is the right time to act. And hopefully, with all the the COVID created situation, maybe more and more people are realizing the value of environment. They are seeing the clear skies, less pollution, and also wildlife everywhere. The return of wildlife, which makes people realize that we are probably the virus on Earth, and we are the human impact on the Earth is so much, and it is still possible to reverse the. It may not be possible to reverse the climate change, but at least maintain it at the containment level. That is why Paris Agreement talked about maintaining it at 2-degree maximum above the pre-industrial level, which itself is a huge challenge. We have to have technologies for minimizing emissions. We have to have a way of living which minimizes emissions. We have to have adaptation measures in case all our efforts fail, and still, even if we succeed, the success is going to be in long term. But we still have temperature rise, we still have sea level rise to some degree, which we have to cope with. So the adaptation measures are also important. So I think it's not too late.
Sir, another question we have from Mr. Shashank is, he is asking that sand mining is the major threat in Mumbai city and mangroves. How we can tackle it?
Yeah, again, it's a serious problem, I understand. Not only in Mumbai, if you take any river in Maharashtra or in many of the coastal areas in the entire coastal belt of India, you will see this sand mining is a very common practice. You know, sand mining, everyone knows that the sand is used for construction. So we have to talk about better technologies for replacement of sand. People use things like some metals for as a replacement for sand. But I think better enforcement of law is also important, because right now we give permits and we hardly have any mechanism for monitoring whether the sand mining is beyond the level that permits are given, or there are so many illegal activities going on. They are not as such a great threat to mangroves as I can see, except in some areas, but they are a general threat to the environment. And because of sand mining, the rivers, the river sediments can change, the rivers geology can change, and rivers may collapse, change course. So there are so many issues associated with sand mining, which is a very serious environmental issue which we have probably not addressed to the extent required. We need stricter enforcement of laws and better laws, and also think of replacement for sand wherever.
Sir, Miss Mitali is asking, has any infrastructure company so far created the buildings that can take up carbon?
People across the world are working on it. There are some companies which have actually worked on this use of some materials, calcium silicate directly, but that the supply of calcium silicate is limited. If you look at the amount of concrete that we use, the supply of calcium silicate from nature is very limited. So you have to have technologies where concrete may still be used, cement may still be used, but in the manufacturing of cement, how we can reduce the use of fossil fuels. This is one question. And the other question is how we can allow this process of curing to extend further, where the curing process is not halted at a stage when concrete is strong, but taken to a level where it can absorb much more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere than what it is doing today. So it is still at the development stage. It is not that we have already started building such buildings in a major way in any of the cities. But then attempts are being made and companies are serious about it. Not any Indian company I know of, but most of the companies, many companies in the US which are into.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello? Yeah. So we are taking last question of the session. Ms. Siddhi is asking, in order to implement Global Blue Carbon Initiative, what should be the Indian policy and programs?
Yeah, can you repeat that, Mr. Patil?
Yeah, just a minute. Ms. Siddhi is asking, in order to implement Global Blue Carbon Initiative, what should be the Indian policy and program?
Yeah, good question. In the blue carbon initiatives, and some states have already started seriously working on it. I know about Kerala, where now blue carbon is being discussed at the policy level very intensively. It has not really changed the policies, but then it is an all-encompassing thing. When you talk about blue carbon, you talk about the life of people in the coastal area, the way they live, the kind of impact that they have on the coastal environment, the fishing practices, and our natural environment, the mangroves. They are part of that. The way fishing is done, avoiding the IUU kind of fishing, the illegal, unsustainable, and unreported fishing. So we have to have a shift from that. So such policy shifts are already in place because we are encouraging people to do. There is already a Marine Fisheries Regulation Act which speaks about controlling, regulating destructive fishing practices. Although their enforcement is still a question, and people are turning to more of sea farming, agriculture, so that the pressure on the sea is reduced. The overexploitation of natural resources in the sea is reduced. Then there is a question of pollution. The industries which are in coastal areas, the huge number of boats which are coming up, what impact they will have. We are going to have a policy on regulating the activities of the food industry. We have strong laws in place already. We have the coastal regulation zone. We have said it is classified. We have that 1, 2, 3, 4, all that. And very stringent restrictions are there in the one area. So there are certain acts which are already in place, but they are all, you could say, acts, policy, they are all bits and pieces. We need to look at the blue carbon economy, blue carbon policies at a more comprehensive level, where it involves the lives of people, the urban planning in the areas, the industries in the coastal areas, the fishing practices, the exploitation of natural resources like oil and other metals and minerals, non-living resources. So we are actually gradually, but surely and steadily moving towards a phase where we will talk about the entire gamut of activities in the coastal environment under the umbrella of the blue carbon. And it's also good because we have a large number of resources which are untapped, which can be sustainably tapped and used for the benefit of the humankind, and especially for the people who are living in coastal areas. At the same time, the destructive effect of activities can be minimized. So we need to go a long distance, but the beginning is already made, and the Government of India and many coastal states are already factoring in the blue economy and seriously talking.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, you have unfolded different aspects of environmental challenges and urbanization, as well the innovative solutions for us. I thank you again for the wonderful session. Now, I would like to request our Executive Director, Mr. Virendra Tiwari, APCCF Mangrove Cell, to express his thoughts.
I thank Vasudevan sir for such a comprehensive presentation covering almost all the aspects dealing with the adverse impact of the cities on environment. And it is when the proposal came as to who should be the speaker on this occasion, I think the only name which came to our mind was that of Vasudevan sir. And we all know about his contribution to Mangrove Cell and Mangrove Foundation, and particularly the area, almost 15,000 hectare area of government land which is having mangrove is declared as a reserve forest, and the many new initiatives he has taken for the livelihood based on mangroves. And Vasudevan sir, he is an outstanding speaker. I and I hope all the participants must have benefited from his talk. And also, it is so timely. The, this webinar uh, is held. It is showing we are facing this coronavirus crisis, and as Sir has already said that 3% of the cities are contributing to more than 70% of the problems regarding environment. So this is the time I think those living in the cities should adopt and start living in a more sustainable manner. I once again congratulate everybody on occasion of this World Environment Day. I once again thank Mr. Vasudevan for sparing his time and accepting our invitation. And I also thank Mangrove Foundation and our NGO partner for organizing this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. And I thank all the organizers, especially Mangrove Foundation, United Way, and all the participants, and also Mr. Tiwari for inviting me to talk on this very important and relevant subject. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
At the end of the session, I would like to thank our officials for supporting and encouraging us. I would also like to thank United Way Mumbai for collaborating for this webinar, as well to all the participants around the globe for attending this session. Lastly, I would like to request you all to kindly follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for the next update. Thank you so much. Have a happy World Environment Day and safe time. Thank you so much, sir.
This conference is no longer being recorded.